Let's start with the bad news first. The Last of Us Part 2 does not support the HDR calibration from the PlayStation 5. Hello and welcome back to my channel Amok for All. And if you're new to this channel, please do me a big favor and subscribe now. I would much appreciate it, okay? Thank you very much. And now we're starting. And yes, unfortunately, The Last of Us 2 is not supporting the internal calibration from the PlayStation 5. So it doesn't matter what you set up here, it has no impact at all in the game. But there are also good news. I haven't seen any black rays when we activating HDR. OLED black is still OLED black. Okay, so before we start talking about HDR in this game, let's talk about effects like motion blur, camera shake and film grain. And as you know, I'm not a big fan of motion blur. Camera shake, I haven't seen that much difference between 10 and 0, but maybe I'm looking at the wrong scene at the moment. And film grain, of course, is for me an absolute no-go, because what happened, and I'm not sure if you can see this on the camera, so right now, if I'm looking at the bushes here, you have a lot of noise in this object. And when I'm disabling film grain to 0, this is gone and I just can see the objects, the bushes or the trees or whatever. So film grain for me, I'm not sure who invented this, but this has nothing to do in a game in my opinion. Camera shake, as I told you, I haven't seen that much different between 10 and 1. I will leave it for now on 5. But now to the most important setting, motion blur. So again, I'm not a big fan and usually I'm turning this off, especially when I'm playing 60 frames per second games, this is off. But we're still talking about 30 frames per second, and in my opinion, it is not a very nice 30 frames per second. I mean, it is stable 30 frames, but what you have without any motion blur, you have a very bad, how should I say, this double edges from all the objects. When you move around, you can see the trees coming up twice, the mountains, the edges from the mountains coming up twice, stuff like this when motion blur is disabled. So I found with motion blur on 5, you get almost rid of this bad effect with the double, what is the name? I call it edges, okay? And you're not adding too much motion blur with number 5. So number 10 is too much in my opinion. So if you put this on 10, then the whole picture is really blurry. And of course you can't see any double edges anymore, but the whole picture is so blurry when you move. I really don't like this. So for me, putting this on number 5 is a very good compromise. So there are many more options when you go to accessibility. You can change your complete appearance from your HUD, like the HUD scale. You can make it bigger, smaller. You can change the background, darken, light and default, and also you can completely change the color. Absolutely up to you what you do here. Very important or very nice feature is on motion sickness. You can change your camera distance and field of view. And what does this means? We start with camera distance -5 because I maybe can show you this. So now we are very close to the character, and now I'm changing this to +5, and let's see what's happening when I go back. We are now much further away, which is in my opinion better because now we have a better overview. The next point is field of view, and of course we know what field of view is doing. Let's say we're focusing on the top from the left hand side from the mountain, okay? So at the moment we can't see it, okay? So we're changing our field of view also to +5, and now there is our mountain, and there is actually not really a big difference in terms of this fish eye or whatever you call this when you move around. So my recommended options in motion sickness is actually turn everything on +5, because then you have a much better overview in the game. Let's talk about HDR, and sorry for the dark picture, but that's the only way to show you what is going on my screen. So even the game is not supporting the internal HDR calibration from the PlayStation 5, I would recommend to use HGiG, because as always, what is dynamic tone mapping doing? It's overbrighten the screen in darker areas like this. And this is not how it is. So even with dynamic tone mapping off, you still have HDR, and that's the brightness from HDR at the moment. You can see HGiG and dynamic tone mapping off, there's no difference in brightness, but dynamic tone mapping on will just blow out the whole picture again, and it doesn't look quite right to me. HGiG on the other hand, when we have a look on this picture here, it's doing a great job. But what I have to say, especially on this test screen or test scene, and that's why I chose it, in my opinion, dynamic tone mapping on looks actually better when we just focusing on the clouds than HGiG. And it really, because dynamic tone mapping now brings out the clouds a little bit better than HGiG, but this is most likely because it's not supported by the game, HGiG. But nevertheless, I would recommend to use HGiG, because when we're talking about the clouds, yes, I agree, dynamic tone mapping looks better, but when we're talking about this area here, and I'm changing this from dynamic tone mapping to HGiG, I can see more details from the sun rays, or whatever this you call this, where the sun goes down behind the mountain. It looks just a little bit better with HGiG because it brings out more details. So, and also, what I changed in the menu, no, not this one, just get rid of this. I'm talking about this one here, display settings and brightness settings and contrast settings. So I changed the HUD brightness to 1, so standard is a 5, which it's just the brightness from all the HUDs and the option menus. So I don't need this very bright, so I changed it to 1. Contrast I changed to -1 and brightness to -2. I'm not quite sure it is -2 or -3 actually, but why I did this, because, just give me a second, especially with this clouds here, at the moment there is almost no difference between this big cloud. This is just a big white spot, but as soon I reducing this the brightness to -1, I can see more details. With -2 there are much more details visible, and it looks like that -3 is still changing something, but I think maybe it is already too much into decreasing the brightness. So -2, I think it's the right value, maybe -1, -2, depends on your TV of course. And what I did to compensate a little bit the loss of the brightness, I changed the contrast also to -1. And what the contrast is doing, it's not affecting really the bright areas. When you change it to -1, it will just affect the dark or the background here. It's getting a little bit brighter again, because we reduce the brightness, so we're losing a little bit of the brightness in the dark areas, and with contrast to -1 we're getting brightness back. So I think -1 and -2 on the brightness, so -1 contrast and -2 on the brightness, is a really good compromise when you use this with HGiG. Okay, so that's for this video, and always keep in mind those are my recommended settings which I like, which I prefer, and my TV is also calibrated, which can make of course a big difference to your TV, which maybe is uncalibrated. So if you like to know what settings I'm using on my TV, then the link is in the description, so just give it a try. You can't harm anything on your TV, so just put the values in, let me know what you think. And yeah, I would much appreciate a like, of course, and if you're new to this channel, subscribe and put in the comments, please, what game you like to see next, because I have so many more. I just bought this here, stuff like this. You know, I have no idea which I should do next, and by the way, this looks like a very great game. Anyway, so thank you very much for watching me again. I see you next time. Bye.